Even actually start, I'm going to test. I always forget to bring this Logitech clicker, so I'm always standing by my computer so I can bash the buttons and make sure it all works, but let's have a look. Awesome, that works, fantastic. We'll pull back the curtain on that immediately. Good afternoon, how are we all? Having a good time? It's a couple of good talks so far. Watch me destroy the vibe that we've got in here. No. My name is Velida. I am a software engineer and Microsoft Azure MVP. Now, for those of you who are a little bit more keen-eyed than your peers, I kind of changed my talk at the last minute. I was going to talk to you fine folks today about building AI workloads on Kubernetes with Cato. But I'm in the process of some things at work and I couldn't get enough GPUs provisioned in time. So I've done a quick pivot to talk to you today about building MCP servers with .NET. I went to a summit in Seattle, MVP Summit, which was an awesome time with, I see a couple of my friends in the audience who I attended with, and everyone was talking about this thing, MCP. So I was like, okay, awesome, fantastic, another term that I have to try and learn so I can talk about it. So I've built something up very quickly over the past couple of days, and I'm going to show it to you and talk a little bit about MCP. So we're going to take a little bit of a level 100, 200 type talk, so it's not going to be anything too complex. If you do have questions as we go along, feel free to shout out. Someone will bring the microphone to you so the folks online can hear it as well. The folks online can't actually ask questions, can they? No, okay.
Try the meetup page.
Try the meetup page. Awesome, fantastic. So yeah, if you do have questions, do ask. Otherwise, we'll kick into it. So yeah, my name is Velida, lead software engineer at Mantle Group, a consultancy based all around Australia and New Zealand. I'm also a Microsoft MVP specializing in Kubernetes and open source, which sounds very fancy than it actually is. But day by day, I'm a .NET developer, and I also deploy stuff to Azure. And I'm a big sports fan as well. So massive Arsenal fan. Beating Real Madrid the other day was fantastic, brilliant. Inject that into my veins. But I'm also a Carlton Football Club supporter. Less of that, to be honest. And I also love hockey. I went to go and see Seattle Kraken while I was in Seattle. That was awesome. And also NBA as well. So NBA is coming to Melbourne. So, you know, if you do have the chance to get tickets, I do recommend watching it. We're not here to really talk about that. What we're going to cover today, what is MCP? Why should we use it as well? And we'll go into a little bit of the architecture as well. It's nothing too complex, but we'll cover some of the key concepts, if you like. So resources, prompts, and tools. And then I'll show you the little demo that I built calling an API to create an AFL MCP server, which sounds very cool. Or hopefully it sounds cool. Okay, so MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And it's an open protocol that standardizes how applications provide context to large language models. So if you have ever used ChatGPT, there's a nice chat little interface, and that's essentially you providing context to a large language model. Also with GitHub Copilot, as Dylan demonstrated, as you're coding alongside Visual Studio Code or wherever you like to code, you're providing context using files, directories, all kinds of things to provide context to large language models. And MCP is a protocol that attempts to standardize how applications provide context. So some examples could be enhancing chat interfaces, AI-powered integrated developer environments, and also custom AI workflows. But what's the point? Why do we need this? So MCP actually helps you build agents and complex workflows on top of large language models. So large language models need to integrate with tools and data. And what Model Context Protocol provides is kind of a pre-built list of integrations that large language models can plug into. It also provides us a flexibility to change the underlying large language model that we're using. So we might use Claude for some tasks, use that as the large language model for some tasks. We might use GPT-4o. We might use DeepSeek, the people's LLM. And MCP provides us the ability to switch that for us, and also best practices around securing our data within our infrastructure. So here's a nice architecture diagram. So really at its core, MCP follows a client-server architecture, where a host application can connect to multiple servers. So let me see if, you won't see this online, but hopefully the pointed works. Yes, it does. We start with hosts, so programs like Claude Desktop, IDEs or AI tools, access data through the model context protocols through hosts. And then we have clients, so protocol clients that maintain kind of a one-to-one connection with servers. And then these servers are kind of lightweight programs that expose specific capabilities through the standardized model context protocols. And these servers can connect to a variety of different data sources. So this could be just on your machine. So that could be file directories. It could be any databases. So for those of you who will use SQLite, you might have a database on your local system that you want to connect to, and also remote services as well. So this could be APIs, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. So the term around what kind of data we use is this concept, resources. So that's really, when you think of resources in Model Context Protocol, that's really just data and content that we expose from our server to large language models. And that can represent any kind of data that we want to expose. So like I said, file contents, database records, API responses, live system data, log files, images, so much more. There's also prompts as well. So for those of you who may have worked with tools like Semantic Kernel, has anyone worked with something Semantic Kernel? 2 hands at the back, 1 at the front, another one at the front. Awesome. You guys can have the free stickers. Or yeah, I've also got coasters there. Slight deviation because I've got a lot of time, so I can kind of waste time up here. But there are coasters up here that I've had for about 4 years. Please take them. They're free. Please take them off my hands. They've just been gathering dust in my study, and my fiance's not very happy about it. So please take them. Anyway. Prompts in model context protocols are essentially predefined templates, and using them we can have dynamic arguments, we can pass dynamic arguments to prompts, we can include context from other resources, chain multiple interactions together, guide specific workloads, and surface UI elements such as slash commands. The whole point of that is it's really just an effective way to standardize and share common large language models and the interactions that we have with those large language models. And then finally, tools. So tools in model context protocols allow servers to expose executable functions that can be invoked by clients and used by large language models to perform actions. So using tools, we can actually enhance large language models' capabilities to help them interact with external systems, perform computations, take actions, stuff like that. Cool, so that was a lot of slides, I do apologize. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump into Visual Studio, and I'm gonna build a MCP server that interacts with AFL data. So I've been living in Victoria now for around, 18 months, and trying to integrate and trying to get my head around Victorian culture. I thought, well, I'd try and teach myself what AFL is and try and get my head around it because I'm a rugby union man, so that's what I'm more familiar with. So I was looking for APIs that kind of provide public data on Australian rules. So I found this API that kind of exposes just various different types of data. So I've got teams, games, standings. So if I click into that, click on there, there's some good old JSON. And that's just going to give me some data. So Hawthorn at first, boo. If I go right down to the bottom, I can see Carlton are 16th. That's unfortunate. And I want to be able to kind of call this data so I can actually use it within large language models, or use large language models to kind of enhance this data. So if I go into Visual Studio, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start this. Going to let this run, and then I'm going to use Claude Desktop as my client to actually interact with this MCP server. So that's started. Hopefully it's not going to take too long. Awesome, there we go. Go on. There we go. So now it's running. Fantastic. So I'm going to open up Claude. Hopefully that's all configured correctly. No, it's not. Oh boy. Okay. That's going to be fun. So, since this is not working, I can show you how this is supposed to work. So let me get out of that. I'll leave that running, or won't leave that running, sorry. What I'll do, I'll just project or extend. So I'll keep this on that screen. And what I'm going to do is just open up a command prompt, because the one way that we configure our MCP servers to kind of connect with various different interfaces is through configuration. So I'll just get the actual command that I want. So apologies. My plan was to have it all running perfectly, and then I could just break down the code, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do is, with Claude Desktop, there's like a configuration JSON file that runs. And okay, so essentially when we configure an MCP server, we essentially define the server that we're going to do, connect it to, sorry. So I can have multiple MCP servers working against a chat interface. So this was one for my MCP AFL server. And I want it, since it's just running on my machine, or it's just stored on my machine, sorry, I'm passing it the path, which I will double check to make sure that's still the right path, because I have a funny feeling that it is not. And essentially just run like a .NET run against that project. So it'll run the project and say, it'll pick up some tools and say, okay, fantastic, that's the tools within the MCP that I'm going to be using. So yes, fantastic. I need to just fix the directory, save that. I will keep that open. Just make sure that Claude is actually shut down, because if it is not, then Visual Studio is going to complain to me. So what I'll do, I'll just run that again, make sure that runs. Fantastic. I'll just get that there, so that's running. And now what I'm going to do is open up Claude, and it's thinking about it. It's thinking about it. Fantastic. There we go. Woo! All right. Let me get that back up. Cool. So what wasn't happening before, there wasn't this hammer with this little MCP tools available. So I've got this project or this MCP server running, and that's going to expose tools that I can use, which will essentially connect this chat interface, the large language model, with the data that's stored or being served from the Squiggle API. So I've got a whole bunch of tools, so get current standings, get future tips. There is some betting information exposed by this API. Please gamble responsibly if you do. I don't, but you know, if you do, please do gamble responsibly. And I'm not saying that just because we're being streamed, then I'm being serious. And there's a whole bunch of tools here that essentially talk to different APIs. Before I show you the code, let me go in there and ask it a question. So, where did Carlton, get the mouse out of the way, Will, finish in the AFL in 2019? So ask that question. So it's going to go ahead and think, and then hopefully what it should do, it should route that, that request to that tool. So I'm going to allow that, and it's going to go ahead and use that tool, get standings by round and year, and it's going to give me a response. So in 2019, Carlton finished 16th, sounds familiar, winning 7 games and losing 15. And gives me a whole bunch of information. So if I open this up, if it'll let me, which it won't, that's unfortunate. So what I can do, here's one I prepared earlier, and why is it not letting me open now? Anyway, so what it would do if I was to open that, essentially it kind of shows you what parameters were passed to the tool and also the response from the tool, which is helpful for kind of debugging purposes. So if an error was to be served up by it, you could say, oh, okay, the key doesn't exist for a certain property, or the API is down, or for whatever reason. and then kind of the safe response from the, so yeah, I was having trouble with this one earlier, and it will try again, so it will retry different tools, and the large language model will respond saying, okay, I seem to be encountering an error, I'll just revert back to my natural or the underlying large language model. Yeah, and let me try a different one. So let's talk about Collingwood. Who did Collingwood play in the 2020 playoffs? And then hopefully that will route. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of like a multi-step thing that it will do. So essentially, I've asked questions to the large language model. Okay, so who did Collingwood play in 2020 in the playoffs? So first up, it said, okay, let me see where Collingwood finished. Then it will look for the playoff results for 2020, and then it's going to try different things. So let me try by finals week 1. And then check the next week finals. So essentially it said, okay, so Collingwood looks like it's used my MCP tool to gather all the information it requires before it served up a response to me. So here are all the tools that it's used, or MCP tools, and it's essentially come up with an answer. So now that I've got the complete information about Collingwood's playoff games, I see in the first week of the finals, they beat the West Coast Eagles, and then in the semi-finals, they lost to Geelong. Lol. Anyway, so that's what it looks like when you're actually interacting with MCP tools within a chat interface. And there's a variety of different mechanisms where you can use MCP tools. Some people are now integrating it with Visual Studio Code, so they're hosting MCP servers through Visual Studio Code. There's also recently support for hosting remote MCP servers in Azure Functions, something which I hope to demonstrate today, just couldn't find the time. And there's also Azure AI. What was it? Not service, Foundry. Foundry, yes, I was paying attention during Lars's session. You can also host MCP servers. I don't think it's available for .NET yet. So I'm a .NET developer. It's mainly for Python. Who's here is a Python developer? A couple of hands up. Okay, cool. So there's support for that. I think MCP support for .NET in AI Foundry is coming, but there's also semantic kernel as well, so you can kind of combine the two together. Anyway, enough of that. Let me show you the code, and I'll stop debugging, and I'll get some real estate going. Okay, so I was told to use light mode. I don't usually use light mode. I don't know why I'd want to stress that as well. I'm cool. I use dark mode. It's fine. So again, for those who are the .NET developers in the room, okay, cool. There's a few of you. There's nothing too complex going on here. So essentially, this is just a console application. There is integration with, the folks who have created a C# SDK. There is integration with ASP.NET Core, so you can do it there. But this is just a simple console application. So I'm creating the MCP server with standard input and output transport, and tools from assembly. So I've got a whole bunch of classes that are representing tools here. Before I jump into them, I'm really just adding a singleton that's connecting to this HTTP client, which is the API that I'm using for my AFL data. So there's nothing too complex here. And then I'm adding just a user agent to the request headers, just identifying it as a MCP AFL server. So again, nothing too complex here. With Azure Functions, it's very similar as well. So you add tools from your assembly, or you can add specific tools from specific directories. But again, if I take the, which one will I show you? I'll show you the game response. So again, this is just essentially a class that's representing the response that I'm getting back from the API. Nothing too complex here. I've got property names and I'm just annotating them using system.text.json, so the property names that are coming back from the API. And then if I jump into game tools, this is where kind of the magic / plumbing is really happening. So here I'm saying, okay, these game tools are a tool type from that annotation there. And then I'm defining my tools within this games tools class. So I'm saying for getting a game result, so game, and microphone's still on, fantastic. I felt myself skip out for a second, but that's cool. Again, I'm just passing through the HTTP client that I've instantiated, that I've created here within my program CS file, and then I'm just making a call to that endpoint. So essentially what will happen is the large language model will just use the tools to say, okay, I'm looking for specific results from a played game. I'm going to kind of translate that into an integer for a game ID. So this talks to the underlying API. So if I go back into that and let's just get that back there. So now I'm working on multiple screens. I'll go up to games. Sorry, I'm trying to find the particular endpoint, so I'll kind of show you. So yeah, it's seen that game ID is a parameter. So when I go back into there, it's essentially going to say, okay, I'm going to use this game ID to go back into to get the game response as well. We can expose different tools that speak to different endpoints. So this is a particular round and year. So if I actually go back into this, I could say, what was the result between Carlton and Collingwood in 2019? Oh, I'll say 2020 actually. And okay, Claude is under. Cool, okay, so I'm using the free version of this because I'm cheap, so it's unable to respond to my message. But essentially what would have happened, trust me, believe me bro, is that it would have taken that, used the tool to say, okay, get the result from that game, passed it into kind of like a game ID, and then resurfaced the response from there. It may have used multiple tools to try and get to that response, so tools can actually work kind of in sequence to get the information that you need to respond to your query. Awesome. Okay, so how am I doing for time? I have 8 minutes. Fantastic. What else can I show you? I'll tell you what. I can show you where this all kind of started. So, the support, well, the C# SDK came out not too long ago, I don't think. As with anything in AI, it all started with Python. For those of you who don't develop in C#, there's an SDK for Java, Python, TypeScript, Kotlin. Any Kotlin developers in the room? No, I didn't think so. No, I'm joking. But there's also, a Rust SDK. There's always a Rust SDK in open source, and also Swift as well. So this is github.com Model Context Protocol. Some different types of servers. So the server that I showed you today is very basic. It's just basically making API calls, and we're using that to connect to an API and to help the LLM use that as context. But this is a cool little GitHub repository, awesome MCP service from PunkPy, or I hope I'm saying that right. I hope it doesn't mean anything else. And there's a whole different bunch of servers that folks have created. So looking at some gaming ones, so an MCP server for Unity 3D game engine interaction for game development, that'd be pretty cool. There's also knowledge and memory, location services, marketing, monitoring, stuff like that. So we can use MCPs to connect with a variety of different data sources to provide context to large language models. There's some interesting ones here. So, Logfire MCP provides access to open telemetry traces and metrics through Logfire. That might be interesting. And there's also a Raygun one as well. Cool, fantastic. So, if you want to learn more about this, I suggest coming here. So here there's some quick starts, which I use quite a bit of to try and develop my AFL one. There's also one for clients, so you can actually develop your own clients as well. So I tried building a console application and trying to integrate that with semantic kernel. Didn't do too well, otherwise I'd be showing you folks how that works. But essentially you can build your own clients that then interact with MCP service, which is pretty cool. Awesome, so let me go to my slides and I'll go to the actual one. I always mess that up. Anyway, So thanks for listening. I appreciate that was very level 100, 200. I've been playing around with this for around about a week. If you want to connect with me, I'm on Blue Sky, Velida.com. I also do some stuff for YouTube. I talk about a variety of different things, so Kubernetes, open source, AI. And if you want the code for this, please check it out on GitHub. Please fork it, clone it, raise issues, and collaborate on it, and just use it as a playground if you want to learn more about model context protocols and you want to build a living, breathing app for it. Awesome, thank you.
Questions, party people?
Questions, roastings. Just don't throw chairs. That's my metric. That's my metric for successful talks. No one threw anything at me. Not that that's ever happened. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. A couple of quick questions, but I think you answered. The first one was, I was going to ask, was that Anthropic's MCP? But it's obviously, is it?
Yes.
It is Anthropic's, okay.
Yeah.
Secondly, how does it know which tool to use? I'm trying to wrap my head around, like you've asked a question, you've got 7 or 8 tools available. How does it know, is it using natural language to say, okay, it's asked me a question about who's the winner of this game, which tool do I use to go get that data from the MCP?
So all of these tools, if I just go back into the code, I'm registering that through my kind of program class. So all of those tools are kind of registered on application startup. Now there is a method within the Anthropic client that you can actually list all the tools available to you. So when Claude starts up, it will say, okay, it will actually execute that in the background going, okay, these are all the tools available to me. It may not get to the right tool straight away, depending on what kind of question you've asked it. It might have to use several tools to kind of get to the right answer. But all of these tools that I've registered here and annotated throughout all of these different classes, they get registered and they're all available for the large language model to use. The underlying large language model will go, okay, I'm going to determine which one based on the question that you've asked.
Right. So you haven't got any logic that does it, it's the
No.
LLM that
No,
decides.
all the tools really do is say, okay, here's kind of this API endpoint or data endpoint or data source. This is how I want you to kind of route the response to and expose the response. And it's really left up to the large language model to kind of decide, okay, which tool I'm going to be using based on the tools that's been exposed.
Okay, thanks, great.
Thank you, Will.
Was there one at the back?
One at the back.
Can it do events like, if you have a code that actually asks a question underneath, can you write code to actually do some events like updating a database?
I'm not entirely sure.
But it's running code, right? It's just, or whatever that you are doing, whatever you're asking, you can write whatever underneath code, I guess, technically.
I'm not too
give
sure.
a response and say.
Maybe. I mean, if there was some kind of logic within the tool saying, okay, depending on this, go and execute that. I mean, maybe. It's not something I've tested in anger, so I don't really know.
Cool, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for coming.